scientific method cannot justify the scientific method. Therefore, it itself is a dogmatic religious presupposition.
Brzezinski model, the technocrat model, is much more interested in the incremental, slow kill, Fabian approach to bringing technocracy into being. So they're not going to send Homeland Security troops to round you up and put you in a FEMA camp. They'd much rather promote everybody being enmeshed in video games, the Disney gulag, the virtual reality gulag, all this kind of stuff is a much better FEMA camp in your home. They don't need the FEMA camp. It's too messy. It's a big ordeal. And so all the nonsense of all the patriot crap on the radio, that's not going to happen. They don't need to. The shadow of global government is already here. And as we said, it's in the latter stages of the mopping up process to move it into the next phase, i.e. between 2 pages of the next page.
We're not live yet.
You hear me? Is my mic working?
I can hear you, Bob.
Sweet. Once you have atheism, there's not really any foundation. Anything can come and go.
What's up? What's up? How you doing, man? We're about to hit it. It's live now. Hot mic.
How's my hair?
Beautiful as always.
Thank you. I know. You don't have to tell me.
So I don't know how to fix this new issue with, now there's 2 separate live streams running. So I think there's a glitch in YouTube where it's when you click to create a new stream, it's not creating the new stream. And it's running the previous stream key. So if anyone knows how to fix this question, that's why there's 2 of the same stream running at once. Somebody please let me know, because I have no idea. I spent like 2 or 3 hours Googling it. Other people had the same problem last night, the last couple of days, and I think it has to do with YouTube updating this, how you schedule a new stream. It's all new. So, or it could be something with Streamlabs, because Streamlabs is kind of doing its own thing too. So if anybody knows how to fix that, please let me know, because it's really annoying to have 2 of the same stream going at once. But
if you go on the back end of one of the streams and change it to private.
Yeah, I know you can do that, but I'm afraid it's going to make the other stream private. And I mean, I guess
you have 2 streams going at once on the same channel.
Yeah, it's doing it right now.
Oh, that's crazy.
And I'm not the same person. I mean, I'm not the only person that's had this problem. Other people had this problem.
Yeah.
All right, let me try putting it to. Let me try that, but it may shut this stream to private too. I guess then we'll know if I do that. But let me try making one of those private. Let's see what that does.
YouTube is gaslighting us. They're gaslighting us. You're being gaslighted, J. Dyer.
Have you ever tried making a stream private in the middle of the stream?
No.
Let's see what it does. I will find out here. All right, let's. Oh, we already got some of the $1 bills rolling in. All right, it says that stream is private and this one is public. Let's try it out like that. Anybody in the chat, are you guys noticing a change? Is the stream still going? I guess that way we can figure out what's going on. If they can no longer see it, then we'll know. It's some kind of stream. It's a bug with stream keys. I don't know. Let's make sure. Can you guys?
Someone said there's an echo. If I need to put on headphones, let me know.
No, well, there's not an echo. You're set to multi output device. There shouldn't be any echo. Still going? Okay, good. So we'll just leave that other stream as private, and then until YouTube fixes that, we'll just do it this way. Cool beans. What's up, dude? Welcome back.
Hey, Dyer. What's up, bro? Nice to see you, my friend.
I know, man. Hey, what I noticed, where is my Tristan content? Where's it at?
Dude, I've had like 3 weeks. I've taken a 3-week YouTube hiatus.
You can't do that.
You can't?
No.
You miss me?
Dude, you can't live the YouTube creator lifestyle and take a 3-week break.
I know, right? You gotta be constantly grinding.
Dude, there's drama going on. There are people gaining subscribers as you run off playing in the woods.
People are gaining subs.
Dude, Frank Trefano, I'm starting to think Frank Trefano is legit, and maybe kind of Tristan's not legit now. That's kind of where I'm leaning.
I mean, that's just, everybody knows that's true.
Okay.
The,
Well,
the problem, there's a lot of problems with YouTube. But one of the problems with my YouTube channel is no matter what, it's like, it's actually not a, this is not just an excuse for my YouTube channel sucking, by the way. For those of you listening and watching right now who think my YouTube channel sucks, that may be true, but YouTube basically cut me at 130,000 subs, and the channel is not allowed to grow beyond that. Like, I get messages regularly from friends of mine and people who've watched my channel very, very consistently over the years, saying that they are automatically unsubbed multiple times by YouTube. So,
well, I mean, that's your narrative, but I mean, other people like Frank Trifano and some of the vegans might have a different narrative, Tristan, that perhaps you have been owned.
Jay Dyer, I think you don't really understand it. All these people that may be saying things that, contradict things that I say, people that don't like me, they're all just gaslighting, actually.
Well, maybe they've exposed you as gaslighting. That's what we're here to investigate today. Is gaslighting.
Exactly, gaslight. But it's funny, the social media companies and mass media in general is they provide endless examples of actual gaslighting.
Yes,
Constant examples, right? And so, when you look at the feedback mechanisms in apps like YouTube, you actually do have some real prime examples of gaslighting. For instance, I mentioned people being like auto unsubbed from my channel. I got a WhatsApp message today from somebody else who's got a YouTube channel, and he enjoys my content. He's somebody who sent me like big fat $100 super chats in the past, and this person was unsubscribed automatically by YouTube. So, and then the last time I had to, you do the little chat with YouTube's, they tell you that they're actually real people, but you're talking to bots, because it's always the same conversation you have with YouTube support. They always say, give me 5 minutes. I don't know why is it always 5 minutes? So anyways, YouTube support, you're in the chat with them trying to ask them, hey, why is this problem happening on the back end of my channel? What's going on here? And when I'm asking them these questions, the last time I spoke with them in the little chat box, I said something about people being unsubscribed from my channel. And YouTube assured me that they'd never unsubscribe people from their channels. They don't do anything like that. They would never do something like that. Yet I'm constantly getting comments and messages from people telling me, dude, I was unsubbed from your channel for the second, third, fourth time. But when you ask YouTube, they'll say, no, we don't do that. That's absolutely ridiculous, right? You must be crazy. So, just an example of the constant gaslighting that we get from social media companies and mainstream media. But a lot of people have been using these terms lately, like a couple years ago. And Jay, you and I have talked about this a few times. It used to be sociopaths, then it was psychopaths, right? And then it was narcissists.
Yes.
And now the new buzzword that the normies have figured out is gaslight.
Yeah,
which gaslight
used like 2 or 3 years to catch on to stuff that, I did a whole presentation 5 years ago, my Occult Hollywood analysis of Gaslight. That was one of the first films I opened the whole presentation with 5 years ago, and I went into the psychological warfare technique of gaslighting. And just like Tristan said, now now people are using this term, but they're not using it even in the right way. It does not mean someone who disagrees with you or argues with you. That's how most of these idiot vegan people are like, anytime you come on my channel and you start talking about how eating animals is nothing wrong with it, you're just gaslighting me.
Exactly. When you see a lot of this, and I mean, it's kind of a cult phenomenon that you see these terms, they get used in pop culture to stigmatize and, kind of label people who don't go along with certain narratives, right? And what you see right now is there's a lot of, and I should have pulled up some examples. If I was prepared, I'd have pulled up some examples, but you see stuff like mainstream media articles saying that if you refuse to wear a mask, you're probably a psychopath, right? You're probably a toxic masculinity exuding psychopath who just, wants to microaggress and put your gender fluids all up on every woman that you see without her consent. So, I mean, it's like, this is what media is constantly doing. Is
have you heard Thomas Sheridan?
I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar with.
Is he Irish or Scottish? I can't remember, but he was one of the ones that really kicked off maybe 5-6 years ago on YouTube, the whole socio-psychopath stuff. Like he was doing just podcast after podcast after podcast about the psychopath. And he would go in for long times talking about the the psychopath. They're the people that they don't got no feelings. They don't got nothing going on in terms of their heart. They got a lot of brains. They might have a high IQ, but they're ready to just stab you in the back there. They're ready to just stab you in the back there. That's exactly Thomas Sheridan about that. And I've met the guy. I'm not being mean. He's a nice guy. I don't share his esoteric worldview, but we did have a nice conversation at a conference one time. So he started talking about this, and it really got going on YouTube. And like you said, then I don't know how or where it just switched over into Psychopath. I mean, narcissist. Then you see all these YouTube videos flooding everywhere about the narcissist, and
yes,
and then at the same time, a kind of a resurgence of serial killers in the last 2 or 3 years with Netflix and this kind of stuff, and how there was even videos of girls. It was going, psychopaths are so hot, and oh my gosh, have you seen the Jeffrey Dahmer video? Jeffrey Dahmer is freaking hot.
Well, dude, you know what's so funny? It's crazy because it's like at one end, media and mass media, pop culture tells you that psychopaths are so bad and all these mean people, all the bad people, they're all psychopaths, they're all sociopaths. But then at the same time, they teach you social Darwinism, and they tell you that,
yes,
I mean, in Darwinism, isn't psychopathy a good thing? I mean, in Darwinism, why should you feel an emotional attachment to anybody? We should just feel we should be dominating and depopulating in order to spread our seed. So it's kind of a double-minded thing that happens there.
Yes, that's a great point. Yeah, we're on the one hand supposed to only be concerned with the individual and his own hedonism and this kind of stuff, and then at the same time we're supposed to have this collectivist obligation to duties to the entire global village or whatever. It's just constant gaslighting. It's constant doublethink and double-mindedness. And I did do a good interview with Nina. If you can go back and you can find maybe 6 months ago, Nina and I did an interview that dealt with narcissists, because she wrote a whole bunch of books from FBI people and intelligence type analysis that looked at the traits of narcissists. So why don't Tristan, if you would, from your vantage point, why don't you define like the proper usage of these terms? So let's start with like, a narcissist and a psychopath.
It's a funny thing because when you start getting into the social sciences, you realize that they're completely unscientific, right? It's like anybody who's taken some of these social science classes, it's a lot of this is they preach moral relativism and subjectivity, and it really is kind of subjective, a lot of this stuff. But what it has to do with is unempathetic, inhumane personality traits. Right now, I don't have the hard definition of narcissism right now, but there are a slew of.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I mean, neither of us has that quote clinical training, as if that really means anything. But just kind of like the basic ideas of what is the right terminology. I mean, it does in a way, I think, correspond to theological ideas, just kind of repackaged, as psychobabble or whatever.
That's what I was getting at, right? I think what we're really looking at here is ways of describing human behavior, ways of describing human traits, and ultimately the human soul, but from like a secular materialist perspective. And this psychology in general as a field, where of course, obviously these terms, these categories are pointing towards real phenomena that people experience, real possibilities in the human psyche and human behavior. They really sometimes they very often get used incorrectly, right? So you have this overarching group of personality traits that are associated with narcissism, and all of these personality traits are essentially evil traits, right? The traits of wickedness, of manipulation, lack of true human empathy, lack of regard for other people, selfishness, complete being obsessed with your own image, vanity, right? It's like narcissism, when you look at it from my perspective, what we're really looking at here are social psychological terms for spiritual phenomenon, right? It's not just when you look at psychology as a field, it's very limiting, and it's very limited to just looking at reactions to stimulus. And that's where you have the behaviorists come in and a lot of these so-called social sciences that are very unscientific, right? So gaslighting, narcissism, sociopathy, these are all terms for evil, right? And they're used, these are techniques that, not even techniques, but when you look at something like gaslighting, it's psychological manipulation techniques. It's behaviorist manipulation techniques as well. Of how can you manipulate somebody's behavior through environmental stimulus, through twilight language, through sprinkling their subconscious mind with suggestions that they're going crazy, or that they're bad, or that they're mean, and that they don't understand what's really going on, and that they don't understand the true bent up, manipulative people.
Yo, Tristan,
Oh,
you froze for
tell me
about the
when I'm back.
last 3 sentences.
Okay, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Cool. So anyways, gaslighting, narcissism, psychopathy, these are all overarching terms and categories that are very loosely defined in their fields when you start looking at the literature. And basically, you could start picking apart anybody and making a case for them being a narcissist or a psychopath, because we all have these tendencies. We all have tendencies to be vain, manipulative, vindictive, selfish. We all have the ability to do this stuff, right? And to the extent that it almost seems like there's this, I mean, you've done a lot of good work talking about esoteric, secret societies, esotericism. And when you look at some of the esoteric orders that are really popular in the 20th century, they're really about breaking down the psyche and bringing about psychopathy, bringing about the Ubermensch, which is beyond good and evil, which is beyond emotion. And a lot of these people that are doing these, when you look at things like ritual abuse and whatnot to open up the psyche to certain forces, you are looking at gateways to psychopathy, right?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
doing
I
very,
think you see in the last few centuries the intentional promotion of any of the philosophies that cater to that mindset. You see Nietzscheanism coming to the fore because it's quite literally it appeals to human pride and vanity. The idea that, oh, I really am the best, right? I'm above everyone. I will achieve the Ubermensch. I will achieve the Superman status, so forth and so on. And it jives well with transhumanism. In fact, there's a lot of academics that do lectures even on the correspondence between the Nietzschean ideas and transhumanism. So you're totally right there. And then and at the same time, in the domain of what, in a way, you could argue kind of replaces philosophy in the last couple centuries. Philosophy kind of takes a background seat to these rising disciplines of sociology and psychology. And those, well, I mean, there's a lot of different currents that influence where these schools, quote unquote, come from. But in 20th century America, the dominance of psychology and sociology is directly from the Rockefeller influence. The Rockefellers intentionally kind of wanted to promote these entities. They kind of bought them off and run them just like they run the American Medical Association, these kinds of things. It's very easy to document that. And you know, a lot of philosophers have pointed out that the three fathers of modernity are Darwin, Marx, and Freud. And so each of those guys kind of replaced in different areas of life the new humanist mythos with the older religious ideology, right? So what Marx is doing for economics and social order, right? He's replacing the older Christian ideas with his new narrative. Darwin is doing this in terms of creation and the sciences. And then in terms of the human personal relations, it's no longer about, as you said, sin. It's now replacing it with the biological chemical ideas, right? Man is this sort of chemical creation. So therefore we can treat it with psychoanalysis. We can treat him with electroshock. We can treat it with external stimuli. We can treat him with drugs, big pharma. These are the new replacement things. And so what is psychiatry and going to a psychiatrist, your shrink, that's your replacement confession, right?
Yeah.
For centuries and centuries, Christianity had the therapeutic process of the healing of the inner man through the sacrament of confession. In fact, one of the greatest Orthodox theologians of the 20th century, still alive, is Jean-Claude Larcher, very famous French theologian, Orthodox theologian. He has this really great, I've only read a few chapters of this, but this 3-volume set is the Orthodox psychotherapeutic approach to healing our problems only through Christ, only through the Logos. You can't achieve the noetic healing that we all require through psychoanalysis, Freud, or whatever the latest thing is, right? I mean, Freudianism and the Carl Jungian stuff that will influence Marnie, that's not popular anymore. That's not in vogue. It eventually just caves into pure-on behaviorism, Skinnerism, Pavlov, Abraham Maslow. All those characters come to dominate and just turn it into this purely physicalist enterprise of just treating chemical imbalances with more chemicals. Just throw chemicals at it.
Yeah, the reductionist attitude towards everything, right? And you see this in medicine, you see this in diet.
And you talk about that biological view of the biochemical view. What's it called? That book,
the book. Yeah, so I was about to bring up exactly Lily E.K.'s book, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Molecular Vision of Life, Caltech, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Rise of the New Biology by Lily E.K. It's a very good book. You can find a PDF of it online. The actual print book is ridiculously expensive now. It's sold out. It's one of those things like someone mentions it on the internet and then suddenly you can't find it anymore. It happens all the time. But you can find a PDF of it. So Lily E.K. in this book, she talks about, Jay mentioned the Rockefeller Foundation, these big foundations, the big money foundations that funded modern psychiatry, psychology, that essentially bankrolled the entire modern medical establishment, which is based on reductionism, which is based on allopathic medicine, is prescribing drugs, right? So Lily E.K. in this book talks about the overarching worldview that led to the formation of the new biological sciences that we see now. These deterministic biological sciences, molecular biology, all have their roots in reductionism and eugenics, Darwinism, and the big money foundations for like the Rockefeller Foundation invested in this, not because they're these great philanthropists who want to save the world and protect everybody from the mean, nasty gaslighting psychopaths, but because they wanted to use this as social control mechanism, right? So they see the Rockefeller Foundation and the kind of the school of thinking coming out of the eugenics movement, the social Darwinists, associated with the Royal Society, the Huxleys, and going back to H.G. Wells. And long before this, what you have is a kind of a cultural zeitgeist and a overt philosophy of looking at all the social problems in the world as stemming from lack of social control over the organism of man, right? So sociology, social sciences, the Rockefeller Foundation, Lily E.K. breaks this down in her book really well. They were intent on using these as a means to stop all the problems in the world, which of course they see as overpopulation and lack of control over the human organism, lack of control of the movement of humans, the breeding of humans. This is the problem of the world. And they believe that they can all be solved through intervention at the social level by governments, NGOs, and through behaviorism. So that's what we kind of see now going on in the world. You see mass behaviorist, social manipulation, psychological warfare happening through social media, through mass media, and through these devices to create essentially a hive mind of people that will respond to stimulus in a predictable and programmable manner. And yeah, what we see is the pathology. Anybody who starts to push against this, anybody who starts to say, wait a minute, maybe, wearing these masks that are depriving us of oxygen all day, wearing a freaking nappy on your face all day, wearing a diaper on your face and depriving yourself of the ability to breathe all day. Maybe this isn't something that's going to save us. Maybe this is going to be detrimental to our health. No. You are just a psychopath who doesn't care about all the poor people who are dying and grandma and grandpa and all the poor children who are going to die from this terrible thing if you don't wear your face nappies, your face diapers. So it's these terms do get weaponized and used to a great extent to to just psychologically manipulate the masses. Whereas there are psychopathic traits, there are, you know, psychopathy, sociopathy, gaslighting. These are pointing towards real phenomenon. But of course, in the bigger cultural sphere, they get manipulated and used for social control.
Yeah, and I think my second book, there's a chapter where I talk about the fragmenting of the nous, the fragmenting of the psyche that happens in the case of some of the characters in certain movies, which we'll see this here in a little bit with the character of Marnie. But I did a whole chapter just on how this related to the MK Ultra research and how they were studying, you know, fragmenting of the mind. And I noticed as I read some of the Orthodox modern writers, one of the great books on this is Metropolitan Harotios's book, Orthodox Psychotherapy. It's a really good book. It's kind of a, if you want a summarized version of this three volume thing, you could read Orthodox Psychotherapy, The Science of the Fathers by Metropolitan Harotios. And he talked about how there's a fragmentation. I may have been citing a student of his. There's a Greek guy I cited in the book. I forget his name, but it's getting at the same idea, which is that this fragmentation that can occur in the individual, which needs to be reintegrated in terms of the healing process that occurs. Sometimes it's so radical that we can even see what appears to be alternate personalities, MPD, DID. So even though he's not necessarily directly talking about that, the radical versions and extreme cases leads to that. But in a way, we're all kind of double-minded and divided in this way. This is what the fall has done. Our own sins do to every one of us, is that we kind of have this internal battle going on that we always need to be purified from and healed from. And I wanted to just read a brief quote here from, it was an interesting idea that I'd read this, this is Losky's classic book, Mystical Theology of the Eastern Church. Is probably the best introduction to Orthodox theology that's out there. And he had a little section on how on the nous, which is the faculty that is given to us to know God directly. He says that when we don't feed on divine things and the Spirit of God and so forth, the nous the inner man will seek to feed on itself, because it no longer acknowledges a higher power. That connection to God is cut off. So the inner man, the spirit of man, then starts to feed on man. And he says, Saint Tikhon of Zadonsk in the 18th century wrote, "The human soul is a spirit created by God, and only in God, who has created it in his own image and likeness, can it find contentment and rest, peace, consolation, and joy. Once it is separated from God, it seeks satisfaction amongst created things, and it begins to feed on its own passions, just like husks fed to pigs. But finding not its true repose or purpose there, or its true satisfaction, it dies at length of hunger. For spiritual food is a necessity to the soul. The spirit must find its sustenance in God. It must live from God. The soul must feed on the spirit. The body must live on the soul. Such was the original ordering of our nature. But turning our back from God, the spirit, instead of providing food for the soul, begins to live, the spirit of man, he's saying, begins to live at the expense of the soul, feeding itself on its own substance. What we might call, usually speaking, spiritual values. But the soul, in turn, begins to live thus within the life of the body, strictly. And this is the origin of the passions. In the final analysis, the body is then forced to seek nourishment outside of itself in inanimate matter. And in the end, it comes to death. The human complex finally then disintegrates into death. So disintegration is a characteristic or feature, not just of bodily death, but the inner man himself can be disintegrated to such a degree that we begin to see even a fractured psyche, you could say. And that's what I think we're going to see with Marnie. I know that a lot of people debate the reality of MPD, DID. I think it's real. I've watched a lot of documentaries, read a lot of books on it. I've seen people who seem to manifest this phenomenon. It may be rare in these extreme cases, but I do think it's real.
I think it's real, and I think it's more real than people realize. I think maybe you're even given the what's it called? What was that organization that was started? The
False Memory Syndrome Foundation.
Memories. Yes. So the False Memory Syndrome Foundation was essentially booted up after a lot of people were coming out and talking about this MPD stuff and its association to, you know, human experimentation and MK Ultra intelligence agencies and stuff like that. I think it's absolutely real. It's something that I've, you know, seen in a lot of people. And I think it's more, it could be subtle. It could be very subtle. And then it could be so overt where it's like suddenly, you know, somebody snaps into, you know, a girl is, you know, stunted maybe at the age of 7 or 8 and constantly regressing and speaking in a little girl voice. You see this with like Britney Spears and a lot of these celebrities.
When I saw that with Marnie, the first thing I thought of was Britney Spears.
Yes. Yes. So, you know, when Marnie in the film, so if you guys, we didn't really introduce the films, right? We're talking today about, we got Gaslight and Marnie, which is a Hitchcock film. It's actually, Marnie's like, there's only 2 Hitchcock films that I've actually closely watched. And one of them was even 15 years ago. So I did enjoy Marnie quite a bit. I thought it was actually a really good representation in some ways of how these things happen and the nature of family, right? The multi-generational aspect of this, I think, is very important as well. Marnie's mother, oh, am I frozen?
No, you're good. Hello? Wait, yeah, you're kind of froze.
I'm back.
You're
I'm back now. Okay, so I really like the character of Marnie's mom. So her mother, that's one of the kind of more iconic shots. The first shot of her hobbling in with her like little Jabberwocky cane and just looking all demented. And I love the visual portrayal of that character. It was beautiful, right? Like there's just something about like a good limp on a character.
Well, she's so also playing it up. She's manipulating Marnie.
Yeah, exactly. So she wants to appear more fragile than she is, appearing like the victim, playing the victim, this perpetual victim mentality. And then the victim goes on to manipulate and victimize other people. I think that's something that Marnie very effectively, you know, displayed. And that's something that we do see a lot, right?
By the way, I did find, I always recommend to people who don't know about this or they're new to it or they're skeptical, I'm going to put in the chat right here. This is the HBO documentary that I always mention about MPD DID. That's really good. It's an old, I think, 90s HBO documentary that covers it in a good way, analyzing 5 or 6 people's lives who have this. And one of the consistent problems is ritual abuse. So you can see why they obviously don't want to discuss this topic, is that ritual abuse comes up a lot. And people would still want to, oh, it doesn't even exist, even after Jimmy Savile, even after all of these cases, you know, Epstein, all this, oh, it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. And then yet here we find this classic HBO documentary from 20 or 30 years ago, once again being vindicated. By the way, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves because we're going to start with Gaslight, if that's okay with you, and then we'll move to Marnie. But have you seen The Sopranos?
I have not watched The Sopranos. No, I haven't seen a single episode.
I only recently got into it. It's really awesome. It's pretty badass. I can see why people think it's one of the best shows of all time.
It was one of those shows where everyone was so hyped on it. I was just like, nah, I'm gonna pass.
I did the exact same thing. I did the exact same. I never watched it. I was like, I don't care about that. But it really is good. And there's a character just like Marnie's mom. Actually, the grandmother in The Sopranos is the exact same. She's super manipulative, but she plays up her like, oh, I am but a humble little grandmother. I get, you know, but she's like this mental, psychopathic, narcissistic, just nutcase.
It's like a witch.
Yes,
like
exactly.
A wicked witch. Yeah, no, that's a really good. I mean, a kind of archetypal character, right? The overbearing mother. You see this a lot in films and literature. You know, the overbearing mother, and of course, you know, psychoanalysis as well. But the character of an overbearing mother influencing another character to become psychopathic, manipulative, and to gaslight people. Well, you kind of had this a little bit in Gaslight as well, right? The start of the film. Yeah. So the film begins with what is it? She's playing how does the film begin?
Let's get to gaslighting. I want to remind everybody in the audience that if you want to do super chats, it's through Streamlabs now, so you can still super chat. We got a couple to begin with. That's how we. Oops, that's not it. But that's how we keep this going. I'm going to leave you this the Streamlabs link. It's the exact same as super chats used to be. So if you have a comment or a question or something you want to alert us to, feel free to leave a super chat via Streamlabs. And we're going to talk about Cukor's film 1944 Gaslight. It's the most Hitchcock, non-Hitchcock film. It feels like a Hitchcock movie right around the time of Hitchcock's rise. but it's not a Hitchcock movie. It is, however, very good. It will be the means by which the phrase gaslighting comes to be. The phrase comes from the movie, not the other way around. There was a 1940 version that the studio, I guess MGM, for whatever reason, they tried to get rid of it. They tried to burn all the posters and destroy it because
I think it was a British. It was like a UK
is that what
film.
it was? Yeah. So they wanted to have this be the only version of it.
The American one, where the American guy is the film noir crime solving hero. That must have been the difference.
Oh, exactly. I haven't even watched the old one, but I did read a little bit on it. Yeah. So it begins with her aunt being killed, and Ingrid Bergman, the Paula character, sort of she foils the cat burglars. He can't steal the jewels, basically. So her aunt is this famous opera singer who has wealth and jewels that have been given to her from crown princes or whatever. And so this cat burglar guy sneaks in. He's trying to get the jewels, and he ends up killing the aunt, but he gets away without the jewels. And then it sort of, I think, jumps a few years into the future where Ingrid Bergman, Paula, has been sent to Italy to study opera on her own. And so, what do you know? This dashing Dapper Dan fellow pops into her life, and he is this smooth-talking Italian guy. And, well, of course, we know he's the cat burglar, right? But he's seducing Paula because he wants the jewels still. For whatever, he's obsessed with these jewels, and he's willing to even marry Paula to get access to these jewels, which she has inherited from her dead aunt, right? So she's.
We don't know this, right? Like in the beginning when it starts out, they don't
Right.
they didn't really flesh that out. The timeline, it's revealed in a good way. Like it's not hokey. I really enjoyed the kind of composition of the story that they use. It wasn't, and the acting is on point. You know, great acting, especially 1944. This film came out.
Yeah, this is a classic. I mean, it's one of MGM's probably better, more well known. I mean, I think I don't remember. Ingrid was probably in a few films prior to this, but this is right around the time where she was like a new star at the time, because they offered this role to Hedy Lamarr and a couple other people, Lorna, I forget who, but they turned it down. So she took it, and then she kind of becomes the next big A-list star. And if you don't know, Ingrid is Isabella Rossellini's mother. So you'll notice they have the exact same face. If you go watch Blue Velvet, they look exactly the same. But
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting because that film does have there's a lot of similar themes, right?
it does actually. Yeah, David Lynch will draw from a lot of these these noir films like Gaslight or Sunset Boulevard. But
What do you think about how she starts out and she's in the carriage, right? Like that's one of the first scenes. She's in the carriage being brought to her new handler. I think the first shot is they're lighting the gas in the streets, right? They're gaslighting the streets, which the gas lights back then,
Yes.
they had these, gas lanterns that you would have to light manually. And the gas is flowing through the homes. And if you're upstairs and you're using the gas, you're going to be using a lot of the gas, just like if you got shitty electricity and you turn on the lights and everything goes dim in another room. That's what would happen. Right. But I enjoy how they show kind of this transfer of power over this girl who's,
Right.
kind of alone in the world, being essentially, jumping from traumatic situation to traumatic situation. And
yes,
her new handler is the music composer guy. It's like this bald, kind of like Jewish looking composer type character.
Well, she's in Italy, so he's supposed to be an old Italian opera master.
Okay.
But
He
you're
looks
right
like a
about
butcher, yes.
being handed off, because one thing that's not exactly clear is that she appears to be still somewhat underage. I mean, I don't know what the age limit on
girl.
being married in Italy was in 1930s, but I mean, she's like 14 at the beginning. I don't know. I don't remember how many years later it is when she's studying in Italy after her aunt's been killed, when the killer guy, pops on the scene and starts seducing her. But I think this is maybe we're supposed to think, oh, this guy's actually a predator. Like we know he is a predator, but he's predating upon somebody who's pretty young. And that's why she's so naive. She's probably supposed to be like 16, 17, 18.
She does. She seems very young. And in the first scene, when she's in the carriage and there's an old man, I'm not sure who he is, but there's this kind of creepy old man that's bringing her to her new teacher, her new mentor, who then she gets kind of stolen from under his wing in the next scene. So within 2 minutes, you get this girl has passed from like the hands of like three different handlers into a new situation where she's supposedly in love with this man, and he's seduced her, and it's a very kind of lusty relationship, right? Like there's these scenes where they're all trying to steal moments with each other, and he's run away with me, my dear.
Paula, my dear Paula. He says Paula at all times, Paula. Oh, Paula. And by the way, that's actually a neuro-linguistic programming technique. I don't think they had NLP down that pat back at this time in the 40s or 30s or whenever. But he constantly says her name as a technique. It's a way for him to kind of have.
I don't know if it's my internet.
Him saying her name, like every piece of dialogue, is a way for him to kind of have power over Paula.
It's like a hypnotic trigger. You can see when he says, "Oh, Paula." He speaks to her like she's a child. Yeah. Exactly. He speaks to her like she's a child, and I mean that's another thing that you notice with a lot of these, and that's something that they really nailed in this film. And David Lynch does a good job with this, is showing the subtle changes in personality, in mannerisms that, you know, just simply speaking in a certain cadence to a character can bring about, right? Like the scene in Mulholland Drive where everything is so fake and weird in the beginning, and then she gets into the scene with this old pervert dude in Hollywood, and she's in a character, and then all of a sudden it gets really real. You know, it's like this kind of false reality that's constantly being led by some of the characters in the film. It's really well portrayed in Gaslight, right? So her whole world is essentially this like false light, right? And gaslight. What is a gas lantern?
Gaslighting is when vegans light their farts. We've already determined that.
Exactly.
It's when vegans are full of gas, and so that's when they light it. That's gaslighting.
It's Dr. Greger. You think you said it was when Dr. Greger lights his fart on fire. That's gaslighting. He lights a match under Dr. Greger's ass. But it's funny, like the symbol of gaslight, right? Like it's an artificial light. It's not the light from, you know, the sun. It's not moonlight. It's a light that somebody has to physically go and regulate.
It's artificial, and the world that Paula will come to inhabit is artificial, because it will become the creation of the I forget the guy's name, but her new psycho controller guy, her husband. And there was also a piece of foreshadowing I wanted to mention too, when she meets Bessie, the old woman, on the train at the very beginning. Bessie says, "Oh, I'm reading a novel about a man who had 7 wives buried in his basement. Woo!" And she's like, "I love a good murder. I love a good murder. They call me bloodthirsty Bessie. Oh." And so Jamie's in there laughing. It's not that funny, but
I like that.
But she's talking about the psycho husband in her story that she's reading, who has 7 wives buried in the basement. That's a foreshadowing that hello, you're about to marry a total psychopath here, Ingrid.
Yeah, and her character is funny because she shows up right in the end. She's eavesdropping at the last scene, so she kind of finishes off the film and punctuates it with, "Oh, look how scandalous! She's on the roof with a new man. Oh my goodness, it's like a novel. It's like my telenovelas."
All right, so and she's the one who gossips. She has actually an inadvertent role in helping solve all this, because she gossips to the guy who ends up solving and figuring out what's going on. And so, but that the guy that knew her from when she used to live there with her aunt years before. And so what's interesting is that when the psycho dude meets up with her and starts grooming her or whatever, he psychologically profiles her by figuring out the things that she's really attached to and really loves. And the reason he's doing that is so that he can begin to manipulate her in her weak points. This is one thing that narcissists and the psychopaths do, is they find your weak points to constantly push the weak point, right, to agitate you or get you upset. And that's what he's doing, is finding out, oh, she likes these gloves, she likes this painting, she likes this pendant or whatever. And so he knows the points where he can begin to trigger her. And the first thing he does is he's like, "My Paula, I would love to go back to London and live inside of a townhouse." And it happens to be the townhouse that she's triggered by, right?
Right, the townhouse which her aunt was murdered in. and which that's the mystery. Who murdered her aunt and why? Nobody knows yet. And so he essentially takes control of her and then brings her, it convinces her to bring him to her aunt's home. And then she feels a little bit weird, right? So she kind of maybe senses his predatory nature, and he's constantly redirecting her attention to things on the outside and saying, oh, look at this, the suspicion is all out there, like all these other people who are out there, they're trying to influence you, Paulo. It's your incorrect way. You do not see it correctly.
My Tristan, my dear Tristan, my Paula. Okay, you're cracking me up. The voice is cracking me up.
His voice is great. That guy's he's a really good actor.
He was a great psycho. Yeah, he was like
his micro expressions, with his eyes. I think there's some far better acting going on in this film than you see these days in a lot of pop culture stuff. But he's a well done character. He's a well written character and a well acted character. And what he does, I like how I don't like it. I mean, it's a disgusting thing that he does to this woman, but the way that it's portrayed, he pushes all of her memories kind of up in the attic, right? Exactly. So all of Paula's aunt's things are in this home, and she comes in and she's starting to have all these memories, and he wants to crush her memory. He wants to crush her connection to her past, which is what cults always do. Right. And so, the cult leader always want to break the ties to the family, break them off from their old friends. Your old friends are idiots. Your old friends are all whatever it is. Your old friends are shills. Your old friends are degenerates. These people are terrible. They're not initiated. They're idiots. So this is what cults do. They break you off from your family, from your former life, and they push all those memories into the past and then rearrange them for you. So that's what psychotherapy does, right? You see a lot of these failed marriages and stuff where all of a sudden, like if you talk to somebody and their wife starts going to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and then suddenly this psychologist starts playing games with their mind, basically, and then their whole past gets rearranged and everything takes on new meaning because of the therapeutic process of psychotherapy. And this kind of psychopath basically brings her through this traumatic psychotherapy of rearranging everything in her life. And he puts all the possessions of her aunt up in the attic, which you later find out is for a sinister reason beyond just brainwashing Paula. He's looking for the treasure. He's looking for the jewels, which I guess, obviously represents something beyond just physical wealth. It's kind of this esoteric symbol of, her soul, kind of, in a certain way, right?
That's a great analogy. Yeah. I mean, she, Ingrid Bergman went and studied in a mental institute for this role, and she studied a woman who had a breakdown, and she tried to mimic her breakdown on this woman's breakdown. And another interesting factoid is that the opera that she sings, I don't remember the name of it, but it's actually a famous opera about a woman who goes mad and has a breakdown. So there's like all these really subtle foreshadowings, and one that Jamie noticed that I didn't even notice that was in the factoids on the movie was that as the movie progresses, there's more and more clutter and bric-a-brac all around her and in the house, and the guy did that on purpose. The psycho husband did that on purpose to more and more get her into a frame of dissociation and clutter and madness.
That's really, I actually didn't notice the transformation of the house much. Maybe I was too far from a small screen when I watched it. That's really important too, because when you look at pop culture today, right? Look at the architecture we have. Look at the billboards we have, right?
It's drive down, dissociation, madness, yeah.
And what's all over the billboard is just, the hyper sexual, hyper violence. Violence is sexy, sex is violence. That's the imagery we get. And it's discombobulating. It's very aesthetically displeasing. And you've talked about modern art and modern architecture, how these have been used by social engineers in order to format the psyche of modern man.
Yeah, there's one of those Stanford research documents. It's in Daniel Esselin's book, and he talked about how they said to intentionally induce mania, neurosis, and dissociation into the mass mind through the toxic culture, basically.
So when I see, and I mean, just maybe drop this down right now because
look, Big Daddy Deep State, the social engineers, they represent this psychopath. the public is represented by Ingrid Bergman. That's the way to understand this.
Exactly, right. So what's that actor's name? I'd like to see some more. If Sergis Bauer is the murderer, right? So that Sergis Bauer was the name that was on the letter that she found, which triggered this whole thing, right? So Ingrid Bergman's character found the letter from this guy who was the murderer. She found this letter and was reading it, and he tried to make her believe that it wasn't real. He tried so hard to gaslight her that in the end of the film, near the end of the film, she brings it up. He's trying to ask her, what is it that's she's kind of breaking free of the programming in certain ways. She's starting to question it. She wants to go out into the world. She wants to go to this party, right? She wants to go to this party from this woman that she knew when she was a child. And it was like a major turning point in the plot is her getting dressed up and saying, no, I'm going to this party, even though he had already written to the host and said, my wife is very sick. Her illness is preventing her from coming. I am
I cannot come to the party.
I am so sexy, Mr. I think he's French. Isn't he French or is he Italian? I thought he was kind of...
Maybe you're right. I thought he was French, but like all the men in this period, like from 1850 to 1930, everybody looked like either a wizard, like a stage magician or Dracula.
Yeah.
That's why everybody's costume, all
like
men
Manly
are
P. Hall.
Stage magicians or Dracula.
They all look like everyone looks like Manly P. Hall in the 40s. like the weird hypnotic eyes, and they did a great job with the lighting in his eyes at certain times, a little glisten in his eyes.
Yeah, the lighting is a huge thing in noir, right? You got to have the specifically darkened lighting for that whole genre. One other side note I did want to mention is that this is actually Angela Lansbury's first role. So if your grandmother or your boomer parents love to watch Murder, She Wrote, this is Angela Lansbury's first role. She's the maid, and she has a strange slang. She likes to say "coo, coo, coo." She's like a street bitch, right? Like they bring her in off the street. And they turn her into a maid, and he does this because she's like a low class kind of person that he thinks he can manipulate. I'm talking about the psychopath guy.
Yeah, the maid. Well, there's two maids, right? The one of them.
Yeah, the younger one. I'm saying, yeah.
The younger one, right? So she's kind of sexualized in the film, and she comes on to him at one point, and they have this unspoken sexual tension. Which is another thing about this film that's it makes it much more enjoyable. Is it's like. They don't have to. They get across like the vulgarity of the psychopathic character and his kind of like I don't know, what do you call it? His adulterous inclinations. Right. They do it without like he doesn't have to go have like an orgy or something. They don't like explicitly have the sexual act. They did it in a way where it was kind of classy, but also got the raunchiness across of the maid character. You know, she's talking about, I'm going to dance. And he's like, who are you going to dance with? And, oh, a gentleman friend. And, you know, so they have this moment, which is a very well done scene and kind of very creepy and freaky in some ways and kind of scary. But it's so subtle. I like the way they got that across.
Yeah, they had I don't remember the first year of the Hays Code, but they had what they called the Hays Code at this time. And that you couldn't, it was a little weird because, I mean, it's almost like there was an extreme back then of the Hays Code, and now the extreme is the exact opposite. Because in the Hays, I think you couldn't even show a husband and wife having the same bed. That's why in all those old movies and TV shows, there's a husband's bed and a wife's bed. It's because it was part of the code, which seems a little bizarre to me. But now we're the exact opposite, to where it's like anything and everything has to be in every single movie.
I've heard I forget who it was that I heard talking about this, and it seemed like it really rang true. Is in the beginning, the studios had to keep things wholesome to a certain extent, and you also had the Catholic Church, which was very involved in trying to.
Yeah, they were involved in the Hays Code.
Yeah, so the Hays Code, which came from Catholicism, Roman Catholics, but it was they had to get this Trojan horse into the homes, and so they had little leave it to Beaver and wholesome family messages and The protagonist was always learning a good lesson. So people were said, okay, we can have some television in the home. This is teaching our children a good lesson. It's teaching them about the world, and it's helping them to have morals. Check out Leave It to Beaver. And now it's like, I don't know, like whatever's on Disney Channel now. It's probably like
total degeneracy, right?
Yeah, like Miss Beaver the MILF or whatever is the Disney show these days. Like
Mr. Miss Beaver.
Chasing Miss Beaver, chasing Miss Beaver's beaver, whatever
and it's ABC an actual beaver, like it's like bestial type stuff now. It's not even
like her beaver is a beaver and it like devours.
Mrs. Beaver is a beaver.
But it actually is it's the protagonist in the end because it's helping get rid of toxic masculinity because it just grinds up the phalluses that come towards it. It's really weird.
Why don't they get rid of masculinity in nature? By the way, I guess they will probably eventually.
Yeah. No, well, I guess the transhumanism, they want to end all death and all suffering, which they also believe that life is suffering.
So, the easiest examples of gaslighting come about in the film when he literally just does things right in front of her, like takes her pendant, hides it, takes his watch, says he lost it, puts it in her purse, pulls it out of her purse, and tries to basically frame her. He does all these little psyops. Then he just starts doing things in her face, like implying that she's insane, and it's contrary to the very thing that her sense impression is telling her, right? Like her senses are telling her that she's not insane, but she is under his authority and kind of has this Stockholm syndrome kind of attachment to him. So she almost doesn't want to admit to herself that he could be this evil. And so this is one of the stumbling blocks to people recognizing and understanding corrupt, evil leaders, is that they have the stumbling block that surely nobody could be that evil. They can't actually be that level of psychopath. There's no way somebody could. The government wouldn't lie to my face.
Exactly. Well, like you said, he shoves it in her face. And I think one of the turning points in the film I mentioned earlier, and I kind of got lost in it. I forgot to finish the point. She wants to go to this performance. This pianist was playing at some sort of a high society. She dresses up in this beautiful white dress and she looks gorgeous and she's so happy. And they're sitting there and they're watching this beautiful performance. And this is one of the best, the cinematography in this scene and the music and the acting is great. But he has this watch and he pulls the watch out, the chain for his watch in his pocket, and the watch is gone. Right. So of course he hid the watch in her bag. He reaches for her bag and it's this very slow, grueling scene. And he pulls the watch out of the bag and she just starts bawling and crying and breaking down in front of everybody. And so he basically triggers her with these actions and then uses this to humiliate her publicly to try and separate her from any outside influences who might threaten his control over her, desires, her soul, her consciousness. That's another thing. He's constantly trying to guard her from outside influence. That's really important to him because if she can be influenced by something from the outside, she might see the objective truth that he's manipulating her and keeping her in the dark, that he's gaslighting her. So yeah, it's that's a really important scene. I really enjoyed that scene in the film there. And of course, at this place, you have the Scotland Yard detective. He shows up there and he's trying to figure out what's going on here. He's kind of like the hero savior character. He's the American. For some reason, he's an American from, I don't know, maybe from the FBI or something.
Well, I mean, this is a Hollywood production, so I'm sure at this time they wanted to have that sort of messaging there. And Italy is part of the Axis powers, so naturally you would have a bad guy being Italian. It makes sense in that regard.
Yeah, so they're in London, saving the Americans, and the Londoners are going to save her from the bad Italian gaslighter. But it's
let's see. By the way, what was his profession? Was it ever made clear? I mean, he's a professional con man, but
he's a composer.
He
thinks he's a composer, and he has to compose in a different house because it's too loud in this house. right? He can't do his work here because it's too loud here, which of course she seems to internalize as like, oh, it's her fault, right? He can't do his work here because I'm here, because I do things wrong, and I'm always a burden. She always feels like she's burdening him, and he makes her to always feel like she's just holding him back. He's just trying to help her, but she's so screwed up. When in reality is he's constantly beating her down. He's constantly manipulating her and making her feel broken.
Yeah. By the way, thanks guys for those super chats. Be sure and like and share. We're getting up here to 350 live, almost 350 live. I will get to those in a minute, but this reminded me of another movie that's really good in regard to this insight, which is The Lodge, which came out this year, back in January. It's a psychological horror thriller by the directors that made Goodnight Mommy, which is also a pretty wild, dark psychological thriller. Did you by chance see The Lodge? You probably haven't, but I'm not going to spoil anything, because if you watch the trailer, you can already kind of figure out. But one of the things in The Lodge that's pretty... We can understand Ingrid Bergman's position as Paula, because in The Lodge, as you are watching the film, you don't want to suspect that the kids could be that evil, right? You don't want to suspect that kids could be gaslighting. Basically, the kids in this movie are sort of messing with this woman, and as they're isolated in this lodge somewhere out in the middle of like a snowstorm. And you don't know why they're doing it. I mean, you can kind of guess, but they basically figure out her weaknesses, and they keep pushing her pressure points. They realize she's taking, I think, Prozac or something, some kind of SSRI med. They utilize all these weak points, and they just keep doing these like crazier and crazier level things. And as an audience, you just keep thinking, oh, well, they're kids and they act like nice. There's no way. But actually, we know that, from The Fall, this is entirely possible for kids all the way up to adults to be really evil, to be really wicked. I mean, they're really
right. Looking at like the Maoist revolution. I mean, you had
great
kids bitching on their parents, and even violent actions done by children. Right. That's a great manipulation technique, right? You use the human shields.
Oh,
that's
exactly.
Another one.
Human shields, right? Yeah, this goes on in warfare, child soldiers, all this kind of. Remember all that Coney 2012 bullshit? I mean, there were child soldiers and this kind of stuff, even though Coney was probably long dead. But yeah, that's part of that tactic, is to utilize, and yes, the children are damaged, as we'll see with Marnie, but that still doesn't, two wrongs don't make a right. You know what I mean? Just because they're damaged doesn't mean that it's okay if they're psychopathic, right? He gets her to eventually question her own memories. He isolates her, as you pointed out. I like the analogy to the cult leaders. I didn't even think about that, but he acts just like a cult leader. It's the same pattern of psychopathy. Great point there.
Which is another thing that when you look at the traits of a psychopath, it's all cult leader, right? And it's also the traits of a psychopath are, I think I'm frozen. Am I here?
And another thing too is that he knows that she doesn't want to believe it, and he can play on that. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm back now.
Yeah, you're back. He knows that she doesn't want to believe it, and he can play on that, right? She doesn't want to admit this to herself because of the implications and how crazy it would be, and she looks like a fool for having gotten with this guy. Don't gaslight me.
I didn't just turn on the light.
Tristan walking away, that's gaslighting.
No, I didn't just walk away. What are you talking about, Jay?
There you go.
I've been here.
Now we have a perfect example of it, right? He says, Tristan just gaslighted the whole audience. He said he didn't walk away. We saw that he did. What
are you talking about?
Yeah. Stop flickering that light, and now you have to tell me that you didn't.
There is no light. What are you talking about?
There is no light yet. Tristan's a gaslighter. We caught him exposed. He's exposed as a gaslighter.
They did a good job with the items they chose. Right? Like her brooch was the first thing that went missing, and it's just like little things that he would hide from her. He'd move around in the house. But then I thought it was an interesting concept of like bringing other people into the gaslighting, and it happens almost naturally, right? Like with the maid. It's not like she had to be briefed and like, hey, we're gonna mess with this lady. We're gonna drive her nuts. We're gonna abuse her. But the maid kind of just in this like kind of demonic way that it found that kind of whatever that thing found its opening in her, and she became a part of the plot against Paula.
Yeah.
And just due to her own lust for the handsome Sergius Bauer, or what's his name? Anton, right? Anton is his last name. Through her lust for him, perhaps, or her just boredom and being a busybody, she got in on it and became a major part of the manipulation of Paula.
Exactly. Let's move on now, unless you have anything else in Gaslight. It's a classic movie. I highly recommend people watch it if you want to get an insight into psychological warfare, manipulation, all these kind of techniques. That's a better means of trying to understand this than all the idiots on YouTube trying to talk about this stuff. They don't know what they're talking about. Anything else on Gaslight?
Yeah, the last scene is pretty good. I think the last scene where he's tied up, the antagonist, Bauer, Gregory Anton character, he's tied up, and the police officer leaves the protagonist with him alone. She demands, she says, I want to be with him. I want to confront him. And she's alone in the room with him. And he tells her, basically tries to manipulate her and gaslight her into thinking that it's all okay. I'm still your dude. It's okay. This guy is just manipulating you because he is lusting for you. I can feel it. He is in love with you. He wants to get romantic with you. I can feel it. Paula, there is a knife in the desk. Go get the knife and cut me free, Paula. So she goes over there. She's looking for it, and she finds the knife, and it's in her hand. She's like, what knife? What are you talking about? What knife? And there was a really good moment there where you kind of feel the possibility of her becoming the abuser as well, right? Like, is she gonna torture him with this knife? Is she gonna stab him with the knife, or is she gonna cut him free?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of possibilities. So the knife kind of, to me, represents the techniques, right? She sees it all, and she's wielding the techniques in her hand now because this has been given to her through this character, and she can decide what to do with that knife afterwards. So maybe Paula's character ends up becoming Marnie later on. I mean, the type of
exactly. That's one of the themes here is the possibility. Well, we know in Marnie what happens, but the possibility of this being like a generational thing, and certainly in the case of like abuse and that kind of stuff, it seems to be a generational perpetuated thing. And I think sometimes in the case of some of the really degenerate elite families, it's intentional. They intentionally want to abuse their youth so that they become psychopathic. I mean, this is something that's been known by nobility, have had the tendency to want to create psychopathic offspring because they believe that it's like a
powerful.
Yeah, it's like a survival of the fittest type of thing. So
they see it as spiritual power, right? They're charging you with spiritual power, and it's a weakness to have empathy. It's a weakness not to be able to, like whatever, slit a puppy's throat after you raise the dog, which is the James Bond allegory that that's been used, and that those techniques of psychologically breaking somebody they're powerful, and they do kind of charge somebody up with a potential for a lot of evil and a lot of manipulation. I froze again, didn't I?
No, you didn't freeze, or not to me. Maybe a little bit. Yeah, you froze.
Tell me when I'm back.
You're coming back. One question for you. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm back.
Can you think of an instance where, and I'm guessing it's probably on YouTube, I mean, you can give any instance that you want, but has somebody gaslighted you? What's an instance of gaslighting that was real that you've experienced?
Well, I think when you see gaslighting used now, this is something that it's not just like it's like with psychopathy, right? When you look at the definition of psychopath, right? Like if you're to look up like the psychopathic traits, there's a list of, I don't know, hundreds, or let's see what it is. We've got, I'm not going to bother, but if you look at the traits of a psychopath, it's, artificial charm, very manipulative, highly intelligent, but very manipulative. All these traits that everybody can possibly exhibit, right? So same thing with gaslighting. I'll give an example of me, myself, when I was like in my teenage years, getting caught smoking weed in my bathroom by my parents. And so there's like weed going out the window I'm in the shower, right? And I got like a pipe, and I'm smoking pot. I'm like 17 years old. I'm smoking pot in the bathroom, and my parents smelled it, of course. They smelled it. So I think you're muted.
You got like a big Gandalf pipe in your shower. That's hilarious.
Like I like an 8-foot bong in the shower. So yeah,
You're in there like Gandalf, like this giant throne.
so I'm in the shower. I'm like naked in the shower, and then my dad's like, "Hey, what's going on?" So he calls me out, and I'm just like, "Oh shit! Like, what do I do? What am I gonna do? Like, I'm caught." So I'm just like, basically just double down. And I remember just, no, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Giant clouds of weed puffing out everywhere.
I stayed in the shower until I thought the smell had gone away. And then, so then I opened up the door out of the bathroom, and it's like a Jack and Jill bathroom. The first part is the sinks, and there's a door going through to my brother's room. And then there's the little bathroom part with the toilet and the shower. And then there's a window that I was blowing the smoke out of. And my parents are just sitting there right in front of the in front of the sinks. And I open the door. I'm like, all right, so maybe they forgot about it. I'll hide the pipe or something. I open the door and they're right there. And it was just funny because my first instinct was like, no, just lie, right? It was like, just double down. And I was like, no, you guys are crazy. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? You're crazy, right? So it's like, and this is what most teenagers end up doing this to their parents at some point. No, mom and dad, you're crazy. I don't smell like cigarettes, or like that. You don't smell booze on my breath, or like whatever it is. Like you just double down and lie about it. This is a natural human thing. But look, if you get used to that, you get entrained to that, and you grow up your whole life thinking this is how you get what you want. You lie to people, you manipulate people, you make them think that you make them question their sanity if they do approach the truth with you. You can end up like a cycle like this. So I think that's just that's one example that comes to mind of, when I was a kid, when I would maybe have tried to use some of the Gaslighting techniques. But I mean, you see in the whole vegan movement, which I'm always criticizing and kind of breaking down. We see a lot when somebody leaves veganism on YouTube, like these vegan influencers will decide they don't want to be vegan anymore. Their health crashes, their gut is destroyed. They can't digest anything. They're depressed, anxious. Some of them, get really, really bad. And they leave the cult. And what do the vegans do? They say, no, you did it wrong. You were never really vegan. I'm sick of this cutting out. Why is it doing that? Am I back?
My stream status is going up and down. So
okay, cool. So it might not be me. I was thinking it was my connection.
I mean, we had a good connection up until now. It's saying that YouTube is having trouble getting a clear connection. So it keeps jumping from good to excellent to poor. So
hello.
We're choppy, and everybody's leaving the stream because we're choppy.
All right, I'm back. You hear me?
Yeah, but I think we're choppy on my end, so I'm just giving it a second to kind of catch up. See if it'll smooth out. Isn't there a way to change? Okay, it looks like we're kind of getting back now to change the latency. Is it back? Yeah. Yes, I know the stream's choppy. I can't do anything about it. Sometimes YouTube and the internet just does that. I don't know what to tell you.
We're good now. Someone said we're good. Someone said audio's good still. Keep going.
Audio's good. Lagging. Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, so the vegans they'll tell the ex-vegans, the people who are leaving their cult, and you see this when people leave cults. You see it in Scientology as well. They'll swarm them with basically harass them and try to drive them nuts. So you see these ex-vegans getting told, oh, you did it wrong. You were never really vegan. And basically the gaslighting techniques are very prominent when you see somebody leaving any cult.
Yeah.
And that's prominent in many of these little mini cults, these secular cults online that you see.
Like 20 people leave, 30 people leave because it lags. I mean, like anyone can control that.
I'm out of here, dude. I gotta go.
All right. So even you leave, like 2 minutes of lagging. I'm out of here, dude. Let's talk about Marnie. This is in the period when you have, Freudianism is still popular in the 50s and 60s, but Carl Jung, Freud's student, psychoanalysis is all the rage, even still in this time period of the 40s and 50s. And somebody said Marnie is all about Freud. I mean, there are Freudian elements, but actually the book that's mentioned in the screenplay is Carl Jung. The Undiscovered Self is a Carl Jung book, and that's one of the things that Sean Connery recommends to Marnie. why don't you read The Undiscovered Self, Marnie? And she won't do it.
What's
right?
with Sean Connery's accent in the movie? He's this like weird American accent.
Let's see. So the chat can remind me, but Psycho, Strangers on a Train, Vertigo, Marnie. I mean, Hitchcock has a million movies, so I'm sure that it comes up elsewhere. But these are at least 4 of the Hitchcock classics that include the notion of alters, MPD, DID. It's a common theme in Hitchcock. That's what's going on here. We noticed that at the beginning, she's almost acting like a spy. Like she's dyed her hair. She goes and steals a bunch of money from some place she works at. And then we realized that that's her scam. Her scam, for some reason, is to get jobs, Tibby Hedren, Marnie, to go work at some place under an assumed identity, which was a lot easier back in the 60s or whatever. And then she just gets the code to the workplace safe, takes the money, runs off, and then washes the dye out of her hair. And then she moves on to the next one, right? That's her scam. That's what she's running. She gets this money, and then she goes and buys things to try to get her mom's favor. She buys her mom a fur thing. And her mom is this kind of like backwards redneck woman that it seems unassuming, but as we find out, she's actually super manipulative and doesn't really love Marnie. And Marnie just keeps feeding, trying to win her mom's favor, and it doesn't work.
And the mom, we talked about the mom a little bit earlier. She's a great character, though. She's this hobbling, seemingly physically broken, crooked little woman who's got a great accent.
I like her line when she's like, "Now we don't do none of that smart Bible talk in my house. Don't bring that smart Bible talk." What is smart Bible talk?
3-syllable words in my house.
So she's very resentful. She resents anybody who's successful. Marnie, has these different quasi-successful jobs. I mean, she can go and get the jobs that she wants. Men do like her, and the mom seems to resent all this. Are we good? Is the camera hear us? Is everything okay? It says excellent connection now, so.
I think we got a good connection. And Marnie also, she's always jockeying for her mom's approval, right? Like she says something along the lines of, "Why don't you love me? Why don't you?" And the mother has this like a neighbor girl who comes over and hangs out. She treats
the surrogate daughter, yeah.
And Marnie, who's a grown woman, is jealous of this like whatever 10 or 12-year-old girl, and overtly and even verbally jealous, tells her mom, "Why don't you love me? You don't love me enough," something like that.
Yeah. Why do you love this 10-year-old girl next door and you treat her like a daughter? You don't love me. And the mom never says, we're going to find out later, but we see that that's setting up the fact that Marnie is manipulated by her mom, her motherly archetype that she's never been able to please. And the mom has instilled in Marnie that all men are evil, all men are going to beat you, and they're evil. Mm-hmm. And so Marnie will never be attached. She can't stand for men to touch her, right? She's like, "Don't touch me."
Yeah. Which is, it's funny because we're just talking about Gaslight, how the psychopath character who gaslights the female protagonist does the same thing, wants to keep control over her by manipulating the relationships around her and carefully guarding that relationship, and manipulates those weaknesses and those, the natural human desire for the mother or father's love can just be hijacked and twisted into something manipulative. Right.
So she instills in Marnie that hatred of men, which is kind of just this sort of feminism was kind of getting, third wave feminism was starting to kick off around this time period by the fact that Abby Rockefeller funded it, by the way. There is, the first thing that we start to notice is that Marnie is easily triggered. She's triggered specifically by colors, and not just colors. We'll find out there's other triggers as well, but the Sean Connery character will start to piece this together over time, but this is something that is relevant to psychoanalysis, both Freudian, I guess, and other psychobabble guys, is that they've come up with theories about what they call erotic crystallization, which is where anytime that you were at a young stage of development or whatever, maybe when you're starting to have puberty and you you start to associate whatever was around you, at the time that you began puberty, right? Maybe you had puberty and you saw women's shoes, right? So you have a foot fetish or shoe fetish, something like this. This goes into how they analyze a lot of serial killers, and he's got a obsession with women's clothes, and that's probably because of, if he was abused at a certain point when he was young, and the abuser was, I don't know, wearing pantyhose, so these associations.
The imprint of trauma. Yeah, you become hyper in those moments where something crazy and traumatic happens, whether it's a car accident,
right,
or if you were robbed, or you see some violent act, you're involved in a violent act, or raped or abused. At that time, you become super hyper aware of your environment. You become things kind of slow down in those crazy moments, right? With adrenaline and all the stress hormones, time seems to kind of dilate, and we become hyper aware of our environment. And in those traumatic situations, people can even become so traumatized that they, in order to deal with that trauma, kind of take on a new personality, right? Invent a new narrative.
Exactly right. The brain seems to fracture in order to safeguard the core personality. And that's where you get this radical fracturing. By the way, somebody in the chat said that when you were in the shower, you were gaslighting.
It's gaslighting and gaslighting.
And I was thinking your dad would be like Saruman if you had that big Gandalf pipe. And you remember the line where Saruman says to Gandalf, he says, "Your love of the halfling leaf has clouded your mind."
Yes.
That's what your dad said to you when you got out of the shower. He's like, your love of the halfling leaf. Your dad's exactly like your dad's dressed like Saruman. He's got like a big wizard's robe on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I couldn't pass up that comment in the chat there. Yes. Another interesting element, I'm sure you caught this too, was that when we introduced the character of Sean Connery, he has this fascination with breaking wild animals. Yes. Marnie is the wild animal, right?
Tame the shrew. You must tame the...
I must tame the shrew. Yes, Marnie, I must tame the shrew.
Marnie.
Come now, Marnie.
Slap you around a bit, Marnie. Slap you around and make love to you.
So he tames the shrew. Exactly. He is obsessed with zoology. I think he's a publisher or something, but he studies the instincts of predators. And then there's a specific analogy between Marnie's love for horses and breaking in a horse. This goes back to Plato. One of the famous analogies of Platonism is that Plato says that the reasoning faculties have to tame the body's passions that are kind of uncontrollable. He says they're like a charioteer with these horses that are going crazy, and it's like breaking a horse in to tame those passions. Marnie is this force of nature. She's out of control. She's totally controlled by her passions to the point that she seems to even go into these alternate states. So when she gets triggered, the red makes her upset, and she knows to like get rid of anything red. She'll get rid of clothing. She'll get rid of polka dot. That she can't look at the jockey who has red polka dots on his suit. She can't look at the flowers that are red. But when the lightning comes, that's when she goes into the catatonic state, and she she goes into this other thing, right?
Was it thunder or lightning? Was it both?
It was the storm, basically.
Yeah. So physical triggers just putting her into this almost catatonic state, and this is probably one of the first films that really explored that, like getting triggered into a psychological state. Trauma and triggering and MPD. It's probably one of the earlier films that
it is one of the early. It's in. I forgot the Hitchcock film with. There's one earlier that we did. It's in my book, and it uses the surrealist art of Dali. Somebody in the chat will know. What's the older? It's actually the Hitchcock film just about alternate identities. But there's a psychiatrist who's studying this. It is older, but you're right that this was pretty new to the scene. Spellbound. That's it. Spellbound is an earlier Hitchcock film that has.
Well, it's interesting that this was, what was this film, 1964 or 63?
Yeah,
What year
and
is
then
it?
I think Spellbound is 40s.
So this is right at the height of MK Ultra. This film came out.
Right. MK Ultra is kicking in pretty heavy right around this time. You're absolutely right. And Hitchcock was working with like British intelligence, probably elements of what American intelligence as well. But keep in mind that North by Northwest is the first film, one of the first films. Notorious and North by Northwest are the first to mention OSS and CIA. There are, I think there's one reference before those two, but I mean, again, Hitchcock has to be in the know because, you know, you watch North by Northwest and he's talking about this. Nobody knew what the CIA was when North by Northwest came out.
It's funny because Sean Connery's character kind of seems like this. He basically is playing kind of a spy or like a film noir detective, but a different version of it, like slightly. It's just a slight twist on the film noir detective character is Connery's role in this film.
Yes, he's functioning like a. So Spellbound was Gregory Peck, and was that? Is it? Maybe I'm wrong. That isn't that? Yeah, that's Hitchcock. Yeah, it's Gregory Peck is playing a hospital director, Dr. Constant Peterson. Ingrid Bergman, a psychoanalyst, discovers Edwards is actually an imposter, and they can't figure out why this is happening, but it's because he's got alternate identities. He's slipping into his alternate state. Anyway, also interesting, he notices that Marnie, when she has these nightmares because the memories are bubbling up in the dream state. This is the Jungian element here. This is why Jung will focus on dream analysis, is because he thinks that the truths, right, will come to the fore in dream analysis from the subconscious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the whole film kind of has like a psychoanalytic
totally
aspect. You know, Connery is essentially her analyst, helping to psychoanalyze her to free her from the shackles of her previous trauma. But spoiler alert: psychoanalysis doesn't free anybody from trauma. Really, it just rearranges the deck chairs.
It just forces a person to confront the suppressed event. Like if there was a trauma event that was suppressed and put into, you could say, a compartmentalized alternate persona in the mind, stored away like a hidden file in the computer, you could say.
Yeah, you can access the file, but then what?
All this kind of stuff can do, right, is through understanding the triggers, access whatever the event was. And so eventually, Sean Connery, by the way, it's interesting that she's really into horses because autistic children, for whatever reason, seem to do well with horses. I don't know if there was any connection there or known connection, but that was just it may have just been the breaking of the wild horse idea. But
I think a lot of people who are traumatized, they do tend to really relate with animals, right? They've been really hurt by people, and animals seem a lot more safe, and they're like a safe haven for them. So it's kind of a cultural meme that you see. Is, I mean, look at all these cat moms and stuff like that.
Exactly right. She apparently attempted suicide at one point after presumably intimacy, the coitus. That triggers her. As Sean Connery spends more and more time with her, he starts to figure out what's really going on. There's a book at one point he's reading, Sexual Aberrations of the Criminal Female, which is an interesting book. Another point he's reading a book about wild sea creatures, and so he just keeps trying to study nature to figure out what's going on with her, and he combines that with the Jungian psychoanalysis, which is when he tells her, why don't you read Carl Jung's Undiscovered Self? And she's like, I don't want to read that. I'm not reading that. He seems to have, Jamie thinks he has a messiah complex, that he feels like he can save her.
For sure, I agree. Yeah, and it starts from the beginning, right? Like he wants to tame the wild beasts, and he has this kind of predatory way of cornering her, right? And the way that he marries her, he blackmails her into marrying him, right? He catches her stealing. He catches her. He calls out her grift, and then he says, "Yeah, I'm not going to turn you in. You're going to marry me." Right? So he
out schemes her. Yeah,
he schemes her into marrying him, and I don't get. We're supposed to believe that he really does love her, I guess, but he you know, maybe I guess he kind of does have this complex
Yeah,
of wanting to be.
he does like her, but I think that the movie's presentation is that she will never be satisfied until she finds a male that's dominant, because she's smarter and more clever and outwitting everyone around her.
Someone needs to beat her at her own
She
game.
has to be beat at her own game. Exactly.
Yeah. So then that is what he does, right? He beats her at her own game. He marries her, but that's in like the first third of the film, isn't it? Isn't that the first act? They're
Pretty
married.
early on, yeah.
And then after that, things kind of he starts to realize that she's more damaged, perhaps, than he originally thought. And what do you make of the most controversial scene in the film? And it seems to be like if you search Marnie and you look at some of the articles, they focus on the sex act in the film, which isn't. I don't remember it being too raunchy. I don't remember it being too explicit, and I don't remember it being violent at all. But the way that a lot of people are writing about this scene is that they say Sean Connery basically he raped her. They say he sexually assaulted her, and they say that this film is about like rape culture and stuff like that. But
That's
it's
like a
because
social justice thing. I mean, they'll say that about any.
totally
They'll say
yeah,
that
I
about
didn't
any
think that
old
at all.
movie that it's all rape culture.
Because there's a scene where Sean Connery, like they're married and they're on a cruise or something. I don't know.
Oh yeah, and she's like, I don't want intimacy, and he's like, I do want intimacy.
Yeah, and she kind of like freezes up a little bit, and then it's like he's kissing her, and she's like kind of kissing back, but staring off blankly into space. And if you, I swear, there's tons of articles about like this is toxic masculinity. This is all about like this man abusing this woman. I thought that was a really funny interpretation because I didn't. It just seemed to me it's like she's so disconnected from intimacy.
So
She
people in the
does
chat,
love
right?
it.
They're asking about what's the connection between Hitchcock and MK Ultra. Well, if you read Esoteric Hollywood 1 and 2, I go into that and the various connections that he had to intelligence agencies. They did look at and study the reactions of crowds to movies like Psycho because it's the first slasher movie. Whether he was directly doing MK Ultra, I don't think there's necessarily, and there could be evidence of that. I've not seen any direct evidence of that per se, but it's entirely possible. New evidence of this kind of stuff turns up all the time. Who knows? But I would say you could look at my book and then go and watch, because again, this stuff was the rage at the time, right? So the psychoanalysis stuff at the same time as seemingly Hitchcock is aware of the kind of alternate personality MPD DID studies that were going on. If he did Spellbound back in the 40s, then he knew what was going on to some degree. You know, he's got false flag type stuff in his movies. So Hitchcock knew what was going on to a large degree in terms of how the world really works.
Well, how about like just Lookout Mountain and all this stuff that was going on? The Defense Department's involvement in Hollywood films, heavy involvement. So
No doubt.
you've shown this in your work. You can't divorce psychological operations, Defense Department, War Department. What it was, I guess it was a War Department.
Yeah, Hitchcock did war propaganda films literally for the British Ministry of Defense. That was one of his
Did he do any
jobs.
films at? Did he do any films at Lookout Mountain? Has that been? Because everyone was there.
Well,
like Marilyn
Dave
Monroe.
mentions the directors that did have full access to Wonderland Lookout Mountain Studios, and I can't remember I know Walt Disney is mentioned as one of the directors. Some of the other big, maybe Hitchcock at the time. I would not be surprised, but I can't recall. I can go look and see what
check
Dave
out the
said.
title of this article. Marnie, Hitchcock's controversial exploration of sexual violence and the complexity of the human psyche. It's like I saw this article after I saw the film. I was like, wait, sexual violence? Like, where's the sexual violence in this film? It's just interesting how it's changed. I'm not sure how it was interpreted back then, but when I watched it, I didn't interpret there being any sexual violence in the film. There was the scene where she was a little dissociative, and he proceeded to make love to Sean Connery.
Yeah, if you watch that movie, which I'm not sure I believe. But the Anthony Hopkins movie from a few years ago where he played Hitchcock, it's a pretty good movie. I don't know how accurate it is, but I mean, in the movie they portray Hitchcock like he enjoyed traumatizing Tippi Hedren. So supposedly he would really try to freak the actresses out because he got off on that. Who knows? I don't know if that's true or not.
Try to create this moment.
But that Anthony Hopkins plays Hitchcock pretty awesomely in that that movie portrayal of Hitchcock.
Hitchcock looks like a weirdo, man. He does look like a weirdo.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, he said he was like obsessed with Tippi Hedren's beehive and her blonde beehive. Like he had some kind of weird obsession over blonde beehives. I don't know, but yeah. Eventually, Marnie is constantly triggered. I mean, she's starting to break down, right? Like everything's triggering her. Stacks of cash, making it rain. Stacks of cash trigger her. The horse triggers her. Everything triggers Marnie. And so eventually, Sean Connery figures out, all right, we got to take her back to uncover these repressed memories, right? There's something is going on. He takes her back to mom's house, and because it keeps relating back to the mom. And there's this huge dramatic confrontation. Marnie goes into her child altar, starts talking like a kid. The mom's trying to shut it all down. I don't want to talk to you. We can't get out of my house. And then he keeps doing the triggers on purpose so that Marnie will spill what's going on as the child altar. And she does. And we come to find out it's not clear in the movie because I don't think that they could make that clear, but obviously it's implying that she was molested by her mom was a prostitute, and one of the guys, the sailor, molested Marnie. That's
at least physically abused her and violently abused her probably included.
Well, no, it says I don't like him kissing on me, mom.
That's okay.
Implying that he molested her.
I must have missed that line. I must have been tired at the end of it. Yeah, the scene where this was all revealed was kind of funny too. Like the direction and the editing, I think, kind of deteriorated for that scene where it was like where she's breaking down. It got a little hokey there, but yeah,
it's much like the breakdown sequences in Vertigo. There's a really similar sequence there with Jimmy Stewart in Vertigo that's pretty funny, but yeah. The reason she's triggered by red is that her mom grabbed a fireplace poker and beat the Navy dude until he was bleeding, and
all Sean Connery had to do was like get in her face. Marnie, tell me where you are. Describe the scene that you're regressing to in your mind.
He starts knocking on the wall,
and she dictates it all, and it's like it was kind of corny how just like all of a sudden the floodgates open and she like automatically dictates I thought that was kind of, it was well directed until that point, and that's a really hard thing to get across. So you can't blame Hitchcock too much. It was a hard scene to shoot.
Well, and so in conclusion, then there's also an element of generational trauma here, right? So even though this is not a situation of like satanic elite families that keep the drama, the trauma going, it's implied that it's the same principle there of generational trauma, because the mom then sits down and tells her sob story of how she was, I don't know, raped or something, or the guy ran off, and that's where Marnie comes from, and Marnie never knew her father, and so since there was no father figure, the redneck mom is like, well, I ain't never had nothing of my own, and so I always just wanted to make sure that I had my Marnie, and so she didn't want Marnie to ever move on to find a husband, and so she instilled in Marnie that men are just evil psychopaths. So it was all just this perpetuating generational cycle.
Yeah. And yeah, what about Sean Connery's character? Where does he fit in that? Because he seems like he kind of, I don't know, he was kind of predatory in the way that he came about, what do you want to call it? Marrying Marnie and all this,
It's a little definitely weird. I mean, you wouldn't marry a completely psychotic woman. It's just kind of like, who would,
right? Like you find the most screwed up woman really possible,
right?
Right, the most crazy, manipulative, screwed up woman, thieving, conniving woman who's lying to everybody. Like, I want to marry you. It's just, right. I don't know. It didn't make much sense.
Well, he's a rich guy who is interested in these psychological adventures, right? I mean, this is the Hollywood element of it. No rich guy would be this like goofy and stupid. But
they should have made Sean Connery like this, like an intelligence agency cult leader or something, and he tries to bring her into his harem to, I don't know, blackmail politicians or something. That would have been. Better, I guess.
I'll tell you, if you want a Hitchcock movie that's almost like that, is if you watch Notorious, Ingrid Bergman gets roped into being a sexual spy, and her handler, I think it's Cary Grant, he manipulates her like that.
So Cary Grant, I mean, he's kind of central in the whole MK Ultra thing too, because he was getting dosed up with
He
LSD.
was, yeah,
He was taking more acid than anyone back
and
then, and he was a mess. Like what
yeah.
it did, he attributed a lot of psychological healing to LSD, but then when you look at his biography, this dude was an abusive, psychotic madman.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff going on with Cary Grant for sure, and I think even that even comes up in it's even hinted at in the Kyle MacLachlan plays him in a movie about Cary Grant. That even is hinted at there. But
Kyle MacLachlan, that's funny.
Yeah, I mean he plays him perfect. It's pretty wild how much they. I mean he like literally becomes Cary Grant. It's kind of creepy, but I highly recommend. By the way, Tristan, if you've not, now when you, especially with what's going on in the toxic culture nowadays, you know, Caitlyn Jenner level stuff, go watch Psycho, because Norman Bates is also a multiple personality, and the alternate personality is the crazy mom. It's wild to go watch this now.
I'm gonna have to go, but I think I saw like back in the day the remake of Psycho with what's his face.
Dude, I mean, trust me. Now with what we know now about like alternate personalities and trauma, mind control, MK Ultra. And now that we know that Hitchcock, if not being involved in it, at least had like insight into all this going on. Now, when you watch his movies, it's like, whoa, dude, there's actually like Psycho is telling you more than that. Vertigo is telling you more than that. They all have this theme. It's crazy.
Didn't Hitchcock direct Zoolander? No, I'm just kidding. But that's another theme, like a modern theme with a lot of the MPD type themes. I'm trying to think of other films that have that same MPD stuff. A lot of superhero films.
Yeah, there's a ton of like, I mean, Long Kiss Goodnight, Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson, Captain America Winter Soldier, Resident Evil. I mean, you can go down the Manchurian Candidate. I mean, there's a whole bunch of like just a slew of MK Ultra themed movies, but. Yeah, Hitchcock kicks this off. Hitchcock kicks it off.
Yeah. The Manchurian Candidate, the same actor who plays MPD Norman Bates in the reboot of Psycho, plays the Manchurian Candidate in the reboot of Manchurian Candidate.
Interesting. Let's take a few super chats here. We got a few people who subscribed. I don't really know what it means when people subscribe on Streamlabs, but I guess thank you. $1 by Rebuke Satan. He says, I made a Dr. Greger imitation on my Omnivore Games channel. It is only 1 minute long, but enjoy the laugh and thank you for the inspiration. Well, thank you, Rebuke Satan. We'll definitely check out that. So, Tristan, if you want to look up Rebuke Satan 316, he says his YouTube channel has a funny imitation of Dr. Greger. So I'm sure
I'll look it up.
We'll
right
check
now.
that out here.
He said it's the YouTube channel was Omnivore Games.
Oh, my bad.
Omnivore. Coming at you live from my treadmill, Dr. Greger. Michael Greger.
CB sends $2 and he says, Jay Dizzle in the Hizzle. Yes, thank you. David Dryle for $10. Here, Jay, go buy a compressor. Has the audio been bad today? I thought the audio was doing pretty decent. We know we had some glitches, but I thought my audio was pretty ironed out. Maybe not. Jack, $3. He says, can you do an impression of Oprah? I can't do impressions of girls, dude. I'm not a girl.
I'm trying to get you kicked off of YouTube for doing blackface.
I have what's called testosterone. I don't have the estrogens. So
estrogens. Well, there is another thing you mentioned, gaslighting earlier. We're being told that because of the terrible the sickness, you got to get the sickness like Disturbed. If you don't want to get down with the sickness, you should take estrogen replacement therapy.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Right there. They're telling you that, and at the same time,
and a vegan diet, right? You need a vegan diet.
Yes. Well, because it's because we eat animals that people are in war zone, literal war zones.
Because it's all from eating bats, meat, bat meat.
But you get told that toxic masculinity is kind of the root of a lot of this too, because people are refusing to wear masks, right? The toxically masculine people are refusing to wear their muzzles. And another way, the World Economic Forum, and I retweeted this the other day, World Economic Forum the other day had a tweet and it said, well-being, global well-being went down, and they showed a little graph with lines on it. Global well-being decreased during the COVID crisis, but improved during lockdown. So there's like well-being decreased during the crisis, but improved during the lockdown. And so as people are seeing the suicide rates go crazy, people are seeing, the elderly disconnect from their families.
This is a good thing about underdetermination of data and conflicting stats. So people are like, oh, just look at the studies, look at the data. Like what you do when there's conflicting data and stats. There's no a priori thing that tells you what to do.
The experts, dude, you got to listen to the Pope of science.
Yeah, but what do we do when the experts disagree? Oh, well, you just follow whatever the majority experts are said to say, which is all nonsense. But
which is just whatever the mainstream establishment tells you is
exactly.
Is the right
JPB 333, $10. If you have not watched Beyonce's Black is King, you should check it out. Actually, Isaac already beat us to it. He covered it. I heard a little bit of Isaac's analysis. Shout out to Isaac over at his channel. We just did a great interview with Isaac on Marjorie Cameron, Crowley, Kenneth Anger, and Jack Parsons. Go listen to that interview if you guys missed it. It was a good show. But I think Jamie is also doing an analysis because in her book, she's got chapters on Queen Bee. If you want to see her Beyonce analyses, which, by the way, I've added to the Jay's Analysis shop. Both the individual Quigley lectures, if you just want to listen to my Tragedy and Hope lectures, you can now go buy those as a download in the Jay's Analysis shop. If you don't want that recurring subscription fee at Jay's Analysis, you say, I just want your Quigley research, which tens of thousands of people have already enjoyed, then you can go purchase that, both free halves and the paid halves, for a one-time fee of $20. And I'll be adding a few other courses to the shop where you can buy the downloads to the Plato talks and that kind of stuff, the Genesis talks, if you just want that and not the recurring subscription, because some people have asked for that over the years. Now we're doing that for you guys. And yes, Jamie will be doing a Beyonce talk, and her first book is now in the shop as well. Kaworu for $22. He says, keep it coming. You bet we will. By the way, after this stream, in a little bit, I will be doing the medieval cults and heresy stream that I planned to do last night, but I couldn't get YouTube to do right with linking it with OBS. So I'll be doing that in the next hour or two. I'm not trying to cut in on anybody's streams. So,
hey, Jay, double streaming, 2 streams in one day. I haven't even done a stream in 2 weeks. You can do 2 in one day.
Well, I mean, that's what happens when you get owned as a gaslighter, Tristan, is that you flee. You flee to the closet in your mud igloo.
A closet.
Go hide.
I've had a lot of. Why do people keep telling me I'm in a closet? I don't get it. Like, what is this? My whole life, people just.
I don't even know why I said that.
I don't get like people always telling me I'm living in a closet. I don't like come out of the closet. Like, what does that even mean?
Tristan's in that closet. He's hunkered down, huffing
I just don't.
He's doing that gaslighting in that big Gandalf pipe he's got.
Gaslighting.
He's doing that grass lighting.
Yeah, the gaslighting. There's a funny clip. I had the end of a recent edit of this lady. She's a social psychologist and a lecturer in the UK, and she's also she runs a vegan activist channel. Which by activist I mean she makes vegan YouTube drama
Right.
videos. So by vegan activism, she does critique videos of my videos. That's her activism. But she did this video where she's talking about if. The carnists are trying to gaslight you, and they'll try to befriend you. They'll try to pretend like they're your friends, and they'll tell you that the ideas of veganism is wrong, and telling a vegan that they've been brainwashed, that's gaslighting. So that's like one of my favorite clips of these vegans that I put in my little compilations is that one. Social psychologist Michelle Lowe gaslighting her audience, telling the audience that they're being gaslighted by non-vegans. Classic.
Cool beans. Well, everybody, be sure and follow Tristan. I've got his link in the show description over at Primal Edge Health. If you don't already follow him, be sure and get the Carnivore Cookbook, and you can subscribe to his material over there. Get in his Discord if you want to, and do the coaching and all of that. Anything else you want to direct people to?
Yeah, no, I'm good, man. You guys make sure to check out Jay's OnlyFans, and also his
I mean, yogurt
ChatterBait account.
pants on there.
Yogurt Pants on OnlyFans. His ChatterBait is what is it? Based sweaty boomer is on ChatterBait.
Sean
check him
Connery
out there.
666 is my chatterbait profile.
No, but hey man, I appreciate you having me on. It's been a pleasure. We still have to do Utopia.
Yes,
I gotta watch that
I'm done
whole
with
series.
season 1, so I gotta get back to season 2.
Season 2 starts with a bang. The first episode of season 2 is one of the better episodes of the series, I think, because it's a little different. I think you'll like it,
Right.
especially considering your scholarly work that you've done over the years. It ties in with all that. You dig it.
Cool beans, man. Thanks. Have a good evening, and I will talk to you soon.
Yeah,